News out of Florida right now. A federal jury has just handed down a guilty verdict in the trial of Ryan Routh. You may remember he's the man accused of trying to assassinate Donald Trump on his Florida golf course last September. The jury found Routh guilty on all 5 counts after deliberating for just over 2 hours. Those charges include attempting to assassinate a major presidential candidate, assaulting a federal officer, and several firearm violations. Routh had pleaded not guilty and faces the possibility of life in prison. He also chose to defend himself. As you'll remember, this incident happened just weeks after the unrelated attempted assassination of then candidate Trump at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. I want to get straight to Aaron Gilchrist, who joins us outside the courthouse there in Fort Pierce, Florida. Aaron, the evidence in this case was overwhelming.
Hundreds of pieces of evidence, Tom, presented by the prosecution here in Fort Pierce, Florida, and that ultimately was evidence that the jury thought corroborated the accusations against Ryan Routh, enough so that they found him guilty on all 5 of the charges against him. And if we go through some of the charges here, the first charge, the most serious charge, was attempted assassination of a major presidential candidate. Obviously, then candidate Trump was golfing at his golf course in West Palm Beach on September 15th of last year when this incident happened. The second charge, possession of a firearm in furtherance of a crime of violence. The accusation was that Routh had a semi-automatic rifle, an SKS rifle, that was found in the tree line outside the Trump golf course. The third charge, assaulting a federal officer. That's in reference to the Secret Service agent, who spotted Routh and that rifle in the tree line, pointed through a fence, and the prosecution said that just by impeding in that officer's ability to do his job, that was tantamount to assaulting a federal officer. The fourth charge, felon in possession of a firearm and ammunition. Routh had been convicted of felonies in North Carolina several years back. And the fifth charge, possession of a firearm with an obliterated serial number. In several instances, prosecutors said the serial number on that rifle had been either pounded out or scratched through in some way, obliterated. And so the jury believed that all 5 of those things were true in offering this guilty verdict on all 5 of the charges. Routh presented a 55-minute closing argument here in front of the jury, one that was disjointed at points, was rambling at points, was repetitive as well. And during that argument, he tried to make the case that he did not have the capacity and the character to kill, and that he didn't have the intent to kill, and therefore couldn't be found guilty of that attempted assassination charge. He said, if you don't have the cold heart to make it happen, is that intent? Hard to believe the crime was there if the trigger was never pulled. All him trying to make the case to the jury that they should find him not guilty in this case. The prosecution, though, presented 38 witnesses over the course of 8 days with evidence about DNA having been found on parts of the weapon, fingerprints having been found on parts of the weapon. They went back through cell phone records and said that Ryan Routh was obsessed with trying to kill Donald Trump at that time, referencing 17 occasions when he did surveillance and reconnaissance of the golf club. And all that evidence, Tom, obviously at this point, something that the jury thought was credible, finding him guilty on all 5 of the charges.
Aaron, stand by for us because I want to bring in NBC National Law Enforcement and Intelligence correspondent Tom Winter and Misty Maris, a defense attorney. She's also an NBC News legal analyst. Misty, I'm going to start with you. Besides defending himself in court, which is pretty much impossible to do and win your case, as we mentioned, the evidence was overwhelming in this case, including a confession letter, including the weapon that he used to fire on the president. They pretty much had everything, including eyewitnesses.
Yeah, you had electronics, you had a digital trail, you had a witness who actually was able to get the license plate and make of the car, took a video of that. You had a tremendous amount of evidence in this case pointing right back to Routh. So it was a uphill battle for the defendant, even if there was an attorney who was representing him. Of course, representing yourself, that is a very, very difficult hurdle. The old adage, the person that represents themselves is a fool for a client. But I will say, Tom, from a prosecutor's perspective, it's a bit of a nightmare. And that's because you're dealing with arguments that really aren't embedded in the law. He was representing himself. He was cross-examining witnesses, making statements that are not evidence, but you still have to deal with them. The jury's going to hear them. And then, of course, there's potential appellate issues, given that every evidentiary decision would always be under scrutiny. But when you have someone representing themselves, there's that extra level relating to the defendant's rights. So not a surprise to see the outcome here, but certainly was an interesting case to follow.
Okay, we're getting some breaking news here. I'm going to go back to Aaron right now. I'm being told that Ryan Routh tried to stab himself or did stab himself in court right after the verdict was read. I'm going to go back to Aaron Gilchrist. Aaron, let us know what you know. And I know this is sort of a fluid situation. We're just getting this information now.
It is, Tom. We have several producers in the courthouse here trying to get eyes on exactly what's going on. I'm told that Ryan Routh tried to kill himself in the courtroom with a pen, that he tried to stab himself in the neck, and that's why his daughter started screaming. She was screaming during the verdict. She was screaming, "Dad, don't do anything. Dad, I'm going to get you out." She started cursing, apparently, at the judge in the middle of the courtroom as all of this was happening. Again, we can point out that Ryan Routh was representing himself. I was in the courtroom during the entire closing arguments earlier today. Ryan Routh seated at a table by himself with a big stack of documents, presumably with pens or pencils as well at that point. And so it seems as though as this day was wrapping up, he was able to grab a pen and try to stab himself in the neck with that pen, as I'm being told by our producers who were in the courthouse as the verdict was being read here. He, of course, marshals in the room tried quickly to restrain him. He was struggling against the marshals in there, and ultimately they were able to drag him out of the courtroom. A dramatic culmination, Tom, to a trial here that we know at different points was something that was frustrating for the judge. Today, during Ruth's closing arguments, I heard the prosecutors object at least half a dozen times. The judge interjected during his closing arguments several times to stop him from saying things that he was not supposed to say, to redirect him to make sure that he was only discussing evidence that had been presented to this jury, admonishing him and at one point telling him that he needed to stick to the subject matter at hand and not try to introduce evidence that had already been ruled inadmissible in some cases or reference other laws that were not a part of the jury instructions in this case. And now we have this word, Tom, that there's been this dramatic moment in the courtroom where the suspect, the defendant here, in representing himself and hearing the verdict that was 5 counts guilty against him, he tried to take his own life with a pen in the courtroom, trying to stab himself in the neck, Tom.
Aaron, you said you were in the courtroom for those closing arguments. Walk our viewers through exactly how he would have been able to do this. I know you laid out a little bit of what you remember. Some of the sketches that we're seeing from inside court show him shackled up. I don't know if they're handcuffs. I don't know if he's shackled to the chair, what that is. This is the image that I was talking about right here. We put up for our viewers one of the sketches. Right. How far are the marshals from this table? So basically what I'm getting at is how much time would he had to grab that pen, stab himself in the neck before they got to him?
So I think the sketch that you were seeing with him in shackles was from earlier on in the proceedings here. Today, he was not shackled. The judge did not want the jury to see him in a prison uniform. He was wearing a suit and tie in front of the jury today, as has been the case throughout the course of the trial that lasted about 8 days with testimony, 9 if you count today with the closing arguments. And in terms of the room layout, Routh was seated at a large table by himself. His standby counsel, the lawyers, the public defenders who were supposed to represent him, was seated at a little table just a few feet away from the table where he was sitting. Prosecutors on the other side of the room. There were U.S. Marshals and court security in the room during this moment. And so it would have been really just a few seconds that it would have taken for court officers to be able to grab Routh. At this point, we don't believe that he was able to injure himself with that pen, even though he did sort of put it at his neck and try to stab himself with that pen. I'm told that there were a few stabbing gestures that were made in that moment, but none that were successful. And at this point, it seems as though order has been restored in the room, Tom. These U.S. Marshals have been able to remove Ryan Routh from the courthouse.
Aaron, do we know if the jurors witnessed that as well?
Did the jurors see that?
Yes.
This was in front of the jury. The judge was still reading the verdict and talking in the moments after this happened. And so the jury would have seen this, as well as Ryan Routh's family. We know that his daughter and his son were in the courtroom. We believe there was one other relative in the courtroom as well, sitting on his side in the back row. There were just 2 rows in the gallery, if you will. And those 3 people were seated in the corner nearest to the side of the room where Ryan Routh was seated. And as I said, Tom, it's being reinforced to me that she yelled out, the daughter yelled out as this was starting to unfold, "Dad, don't do it." So obviously this dramatic moment in the courtroom here, not the ending that we would have expected or predicted, Tom.
Yeah, Aaron, I know you're still gathering some information. You're talking to your producer there. We're going to come right back to you as soon as you have new information. I do want to walk through those moments, those dramatic moments inside that courthouse now with our panel here, Misty Maris and, of course, Tom Winter. Misty, I guess my question to you, my larger question is, should he have had some type of restraints on him, number one? Number two, how does this impact that judge in sentencing now having witnessed this?
Yeah, this is a dramatic twist in this case. So the judge has discretion about how to run that courtroom, how to keep him safe, as well as everybody else in that courtroom safe, and has to balance that against his rights as a criminal defendant and potential prejudice that could be imputed to him by seeing him in shackles during the course of that closing argument. So she's weighing all of those factors, ultimately concluding that there presumably wasn't a known safety risk and allowing him to proceed in that way. Now, of course, this incident calling that into question, it certainly will impact sentencing. Remember, in order to represent yourself and in order to be a defendant in a courtroom, you have to be legally competent. That means you understand the nature of the charges against you and you can participate in your own defense. That relates to this phase of the trial. Now we're going into the penalty phase. And when you have issues like mental health concerns, suicidal ideation, to the extent that that's part of it, an attempted suicide, those are all factors that could be at issue when you're talking about mitigating factors that will be presented and whether or not the representation can continue as is. Remember, the beginning of this case, he went through multiple competency hearings, was determined that it is constitutional right to represent himself, go forward. He has lawyers who were there for procedural purposes only, could not comment on those substantive issues. But when you're talking about a sentencing proceeding and this happening at the end, all of that is going to be called into question.
Guilty on all counts. Max term is life in prison is what he's looking at right now?
Yes, max term life without possibility of parole.
You know, Tom, we talk about this. Our viewers at home are going to be listening to this. We're not medical professionals.
Sure.
Clearly, the man was having a mental health episode there. When you listen to his ramblings in his letter in court, right, he clearly was, maybe some people would describe it, not all there. But he did get very close to almost killing the president, and we learned about how close he got at the onset of this trial.
I mean, the thing that people have to remember is that this shooting went down when the Secret Service agent, Robert Furcano, confronted him and testified in court. I do not know your mindset that day, but I know you pointed that weapon at my face. The Secret Service agent is in the golf course hole ahead of Donald Trump. So Donald Trump was on the 5th hole. He's on the 6th hole, scouting out, looking in advance, any potential issues. His then candidate, Donald Trump, played his round of golf, sees him in the tree line, sees what he thinks to be a weapon, sees it move, identify it clearly as a weapon, and fires on him before he even gets on the radio. It's the Secret Service with Donald Trump who hears the gunshots, immediately takes him into a protective custody situation where they just get him out of there and get him to a safe spot. They had that set up. Yeah, it does underscore the risks, particularly when somebody is not the president of the United States. If Donald Trump had been the president at that point, that whole area likely would have been cleared. But it's difficult, and it was difficult at the time from all of our reporting, the tremendous amount of pressure the Secret Service was under with two candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, receiving the volume of threats that they had at the time. Yeah. Ultimately, the system at that day appeared to work, but you got awfully close, Tom.
And Tom, we learned about the weapon of choice as well. It was a rifle. I understand during this trial, they tested the rifle. It got jammed on the second shot. Here's an image of it right now. Right. They also testified that it appeared the scope was, you can see it here, actually taped and glued to the gun, so they weren't sure if it was going to be usable, if that's the case, because I guess it wasn't mounted properly. But this is the kind of weapon he was using, clearly a high powerful rifle.
Semi-automatic rifle. Yep. From the distance where he was at, he could have been quite accurate. He was right around the 6th green on the golf course. So yes, if in fact the scope was operating properly and the gun was operating properly and the Secret Service agent had not seen him that day, this could have been another very close or worse attempt on Donald Trump's life.
Again, if you're just following our news right now, we've been following the breaking news out of Florida right now. Ryan Routh has been convicted on all 5 counts of trying to assassinate then-candidate President Trump when he was running for office. He faces life in prison if he gets the maximum sentence. What is wild about all of this is that he attempted to apparently take his life after that verdict was read, stabbing himself in the neck multiple times. He was taken out. That's going to conclude this NBC News special report. We're going to have much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now, and online at NBCNews.com. A full wrap-up, as you can expect, on NBC Nightly News. We thank you.